Hi and welcome to Leadfeeder. In today's video, we'll be doing a full run through of the main functionality that you'll be using when you use Leadfeeder. Starting from the view that you see when you first sign into the application, we can see that there are, broadly speaking, 3 columns. On the left-hand side, you'll see the ability to create custom feeds, which we'll go into in some detail shortly. And then beneath that, you see some basic feeds that we create for you when we create an account. Those will be explained in more detail shortly as well. And beneath that, you'll see any integrations that you've added into Leadfeeder. So for example, if you add one of our CRMs that we natively integrate to, there will be a category of feeds pre-created for you that will help you to maximize the value you gain from that, followed by MailChimp if you're a user of that. And then beneath that, you'll find all of the custom feeds created by anybody who has used your Leadfeeder account. In the middle column, you'll see all of the leads that have been in this feed, all leads feed, all of the leads that have been generated in this period of time. So here we're looking at all traffic from August, organized by default based on quality. If you'd like to change that to be based on the most recent visit, you can do that here, and you will see that that will reorganize the leads on that basis. On the right-hand side, you see some insights about the leads themselves. So how many leads we have seen in the given period of time that you've chosen, how many per day are coming through, which countries and which industries those companies are coming from as well. Beneath that, as you'll see against any feed, you'll see whether there are email subscriptions set up against this feed, whether the leads from this feed are being sent into a Slack channel somewhere else, and whether automations are in place to, for example, tag these leads, send emails, or automatically send those leads into your CRM as an example. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that these leads are organized by default based on quality. So what does that quality metric mean? It's fairly simple. It's looking at 2 categories of information. Firstly, it's looking at the extent to which this organization has browsed your site, whether there are multiple visitors from this organization coming in a fairly short period of time, for example, how many pages they browse, how frequently they bounce from your site, that type of information. The other side of it is the quality of information we hold against that organization. So if we open a given lead, like Leadfeeder in this example, where we have website, industry, company size, various different social profiles that you can use, as well as contacts down here, which I'll explain shortly. When all of that is in place, it's more likely that that lead will be rated highly. As I mentioned before, if you'd like to swap that to be based on the recency of the visit, you can do so just by clicking the button where you see quality at the top. If we look at the Leadfeeder lead as an example and work through the functionality, we can start to see what we can do with this information and what Leadfeeder enables us to see. So from the top, we can see some Leadfeeder actions, as we call them. On the left-hand side, we see the ability to assign a lead. If you click this button and then choose yourself or a colleague, it will drop this lead into the leads assigned to me feed on the left-hand side over here for you or for them. And what sometimes people do, especially when they don't have access to a CRM within Leadfeeder, is to make use of assignment to begin with, and then comments at the bottom of the lead as well, as sort of an impromptu CRM. So you can keep a track of who a lead is assigned to and which comments have been placed against them. So which notes have basically been made about that lead, perhaps showing what you've done with that particular organization so far. Next to that, you see the option to follow companies. As the name would suggest, if we click follow, we'll have a small icon will appear against the lead. It will then drop into followed companies on the left-hand side over here. And the key feature here is that you'll be notified via email the next time that organization visits your site. So that's especially useful where you have a lead that's quite close to the bottom of your funnel. You're keeping a track on it to make sure that any last details are being dealt with before a deal comes in. By following it, you have that reminder to come in and see what they have browsed most recently and see if that supports the sales case that you're already making for that organization. Next, we see the option to email a lead. If we click this, type in any email address we like and send the lead out, it will go out with a summary of the visit information to the person we've chosen. If we want, we can send individual leads into a Slack channel as well, just by choosing here, send to Slack, choose where we'd like to send it into Slack, and it will drop there for you. Beneath that, you see the ability to add tags. So if we click this, we'll see a few simple examples of tags. Maybe, for example, if Leadfeeder was a prospect for you, you could tag it accordingly. That will then appear underneath the name of the lead itself in the middle column. And you can also create custom feeds specific to these tags as well. So if you'd like to be able to delineate the leads based on something that's most relevant to you here, you can do so by making use of tagging to effectively show you in a simple way on every lead what's special about that particular lead. Beneath this, we go into the company information section, where we can see information about the organization, such as where the visit came from in this instance, where the company works, which industry, which size of organization we're talking about, and then any social profiles as well that we have associated with this particular lead that should aid in your research around this particular organization. Immediately beneath that, you see various pieces of information about the quality of the lead. And also, if you have a CRM enabled, you'll see what is currently in existence against the CRM for this particular organization. So for example, here we're looking at what we have deemed a high quality lead based on a number of visits from 7 different visitors in the course of the period of time that we've chosen up here. This typically would denote a high quality lead based on the intent we're seeing from that organization to browse your site from lots of different people. But then we need to have a look at what we have got sort of in place in the CRM to sort of harvest this interest and turn it into a real opportunity. So here we can see under our CRM information that there's not currently a task set for the future. There's one that's overdue. There are no previous tasks, no open or closed opportunities, and we can see who owns the account. In these sorts of circumstances, you might want to look at this and say, this is indicative of a high value lead. We're probably not doing enough here to follow this lead up and turn it into a real opportunity. Let's step in and do something. Be that creating a new account, creating a new opportunity, sending a note into the CRM in this instance to remind the person that owns the account that they should follow it up. All of that is possible on the lead level, and I'll explain how in a moment. Continuing on, next we see that we have visits. The visits section will allow us to see all of the visits that happened in the period of time that we've chosen up here by default, and will also allow us to show all visits if we want to see visits that have happened over a longer period of time as well. Working from left to right, we can see when the visit happened. If we click to expand it, we can see where that visit went to. So here, for example, if you're seeing a visit going to a pricing page, it's highly indicative of high buyer intent. We can also see in this circle, we can see if we hover over it, an email address and who exactly that visit came from. That information is based upon our ability to see forms that are filled in, for example, within a website, and to pair that user identification done by the user themselves to the visit that they took around your site. We can see that the source of the traffic is direct. They've come directly to the pricing page. We can see that they only browsed that page, and then we can see a length of visit on the right-hand side. If we hover over this, we can see why it says 0 minutes, 0 seconds. It says that it indicates that the visitor did not visit another page afterwards. The crucial element in order to be able to identify the minimum length of a visit on a site is that they've either gone to another page or triggered another event within the site itself, which is allowing us to calculate the amount of time that they spent on that first page, and so on and so on. Which is why when we go down to this visit where we can see 2 pages were visited, we can see that visit took at least 12 seconds to take place. By looking at this information, we can see lots of things. We can see the extent of interest we're getting from this organization. We can see some starting points in this instance of people that we could look to speak to based on their interest. But even without that, we can see that there are others that we've not been able to identify who are coming back to the site again and again. By going through the pages that those people have browsed briefly, you can start to spot a pattern. And if you start to spot patterns around certain products that are of most interest, certain use cases and issues that they may be experiencing that your product solves, This can give you a really clear sense of who within that organization you should be looking to target, at least on a team level. And that can allow you to take the next step, which is to find the right person to speak to and then start the sales process. In order to enable you to do this, one of the things that we offer is contacts. Contacts are basically a directory of people that we've been able to pull in from various databases that we integrate with. We serve them all here, sort of like a phone book, where you're able to search by maybe the role or the name of the person that you're interested in speaking to see if we have contact information for them. Or you could filter based simply on country to say that you'd be most interested in speaking to people that match, for example, the country of the visit you're looking at. So you'd most be interested in the Finnish team here to follow up this interest. Against each contact, you'll see that there are various different options to reach out to them. In this instance, you click here to launch a mail application and send an email directly to, in this case, Jessa. You can also see that there are Twitter and LinkedIn profiles against this particular contact as well that you could choose to follow up. So this will be mostly useful to you where you do have that clearly defined buyer persona or ideal customer profile so that you can search for the role that you would typically be selling to or be speaking to and see if we have the right person for you. The slightly more scrappy way of using these contacts is to first search for the person that you'd be interested in speaking to via LinkedIn. And then if we have any contacts here, you could always, for example, right-click on any of these email boxes, choose to copy email address. That will give you the format of the email of the organization you'd like to work with, match that to the name of the person that you found on LinkedIn, and you can use that to drop an email to the person you'd be most interested in speaking to and see if that starts a conversation that you can then move through your sales process. Next up, we can see, because we have our CRM enabled, in this case, we're looking at Dynamics, we can see various pieces of account level of information against this organization. So we can see who owns the organization, what it's called, any open or closed tasks against this organization, any open or closed opportunities. You see that you have the default switched on here to send visits into Dynamics. You can also create new tasks and new opportunities within Dynamics from Leadfeeder just by clicking the button and following the prompts. And you can also, if you tick this box here, send comments into the CRM as well. So you may have spotted something in the visit information which would suggest that this is a really good opportunity. You might wish to drop a comment about that specifically here. Choose to send that into the CRM and it will drop into, in this case, Dynamics as a note on the account level. Now, in this instance, of course, we're focusing on Dynamics, but we also integrate with many of the most popular CRMs, including Salesforce, Pipedrive, and HubSpot. And for each of them, the functionality is more or less the same. The only difference is usually in terminology, where, for example, some CRMs say deal and others say opportunity. But the fundamental functionality of being able to match leads to visits, send information into Dynamics and pull it into Leadfeeder or any other CRM remains the same across each system. So now that we've covered everything that happens on a lead level, next we'll jump across to custom feeds. If we click the blue button to create a custom feed, we're given this screen where we can name the feed that we're going to create, and then we can start adding filters. Those filters will allow us to profile the leads based on anything that we are particularly interested in. Now, there are two primary use cases for custom feeds within an organization. There's usually the sales use case and the marketing use case. Sales use case is fairly simple to understand. What you basically would do is use the filters to build up the ideal customer profile or the buyer persona that you're most interested in working with. To use a very simple example that's used by the majority of the sales users that use Leadfeeder every day, we would start with country, and maybe we would choose to start with United Kingdom, add that. This will immediately start narrowing down the leads that we are potentially interested in. Maybe we'd like to then follow that up by saying, choosing another country. So when we choose multiple different countries, so in this case, let's choose Finland, for example, you'll see that a bracket appears within the filter, And now we're looking at an or function. So these leads need to have either appeared from the UK or from Finland. Next up, still on the company info level, you may wish to start profiling based on industries that you most frequently work with. So to choose a couple of simple examples, maybe we'd like to work with internet companies. Now, within the industry list, you'll see that there are lots of companion industries. This is the same list of industries that's used by LinkedIn, and there are lots of very specific industries noted in this list that are often very similar. So a good example would be that there is banking and investment banking. There's also a separate industry for financial services. And if you're interested in financial services, you might be interested in insurance, for example. It's worthwhile, if you're looking to filter based on industry, adding each of the ones from the list here that might be relevant to you. And again, it will bracket them and operate as an or function between those different industries. Next, still in the same category of company info, you may wish to use employee count to get a bit of a proxy for the size of the organization itself. So you might, for example, be most interested in working with organizations that have at least 51 or at least 201 employees. And you might also know that you don't very frequently work with organizations above a certain size, so say above 1,001. So you could choose, firstly, is at least 51, and then follow it up by saying is less than 1,001, and Leadfeeder will return you the delta between the two, and you'll hopefully have that sweet spot of organizations to follow up with. At that stage, you would have already looked at country, industry, and employee count. And you can see between each of these categories, we're adding an and filter. So within a category, if you add more than one, so if you have here the UK and Finland, obviously that's broadening the scope of the feed. If you add a different category of filter, in this case industry, it narrows it down from there on. The next most commonly used filter under behavior would be page URL. Here, you can choose multiple pages that if these organizations meet the rest of this profile and have also carried out this behavior of visiting particular pages, you would be most interested in following up with them. For example, in our case, that would often be case studies, pricing pages, resources pages, maybe integrations as well, because that would be indicative of an organization that's not just browsing aimlessly, but is instead looking at the finer points and the details of how they would go about working with us. That might be slightly different for you, but the same principle should apply in terms of having pages on your website which are a higher indication of intent on the customer side than others. By stacking those pages here, you again will get a very refined list of leads that you can follow up with. If you have a CRM enabled, you may also choose to filter in or filter out those organizations that already exist in Dynamics. So in this example, if we choose connection to Dynamics is not connected, we would only have those organizations left which don't appear connected in the CRM, thereby meaning that they are fresh opportunities for us to follow up with. After you'd completed this profile and added the page URLs that are relevant to you, it's really just a case of deciding what you'd like to do with these leads next. There are lots of options across the top here, depending upon which systems you have integrated into Leadfeeder. You'll always be able to choose, for example, an email subscription. You could choose yourself or a colleague and choose on either a daily or weekly basis to send them an email with a summary of the leads that have come into the feed in digest format and a prompt to come into Leadfeeder and view the rest. You could also choose to send leads that come into this particular feed you've created to a Slack channel for this specific purpose. Maybe if you have a sales channel where people will see those leads and immediately follow them up, that might be a good option for you as well. Or over in automation, you have a few more options. You could be automatically tagging these leads as high value prospects. Of course, you can type in any tag here you would like, and that will create a new tag as well. You can also apply that to leads that have occurred in the past. So if these leads that have already appeared in your account, you'd like them all tagged as high value prospects, tick this box, add automation and save feed, and they will subsequently be tagged for you. You could also assign leads if you'd like to yourself or to a colleague. And as I mentioned before, that will drop those leads into the leads assigned to me feed on the left-hand side over here. Sharing via email will give you the ability to send, as the frequency was set to when new leads appear, send one email per new lead that is generated by this feed to a colleague of yours. That's especially useful where you have a very well-defined feed that doesn't generate too many leads, so it won't bombard the person with emails, but it will give them a useful prompt when a new lead appears that they should follow it up as a priority. The other option that you will want to dwell on here, potentially if you have your CRM enabled, is to choose Center Dynamics. If we choose, and of course, if you use Pipedrive or Salesforce or any of the other systems that we integrate with, the same principle will apply and the same options will apply. In this case, choosing Center Dynamics 365 will give you the option to configure that sending process. And here you can see that you can choose to send Leadfeeder leads as either accounts or leads. And then depending on what you're choosing to create, you can then choose to create an account or not, choose who will own it, create an opportunity or not. If you are creating one, who will own it? What will the opportunity be called? How long does that person have to close it? And where does it drop into your pipeline? And the one that I'd most often recommend is creating a task at least, so that you will create something for that person to follow up with. Choose an owner, give it a name, choose how long they have to complete it, give it a priority, click apply, add automation, and then save feed at the bottom here. Once you complete that process, it will begin to work and will send all new leads that hit this feed into the place that you've chosen within your CRM. So I mentioned at the top of the call that there are two primary use cases. The next most common use case is the marketing approach. So you can use the same filtering that we see here, creating a profile of the types of organizations that you would like to see if you would like. But what you can also do, either separately or in combination with that, is start making use of the acquisition filters that we see here. And what these will do is they will allow you to go to effectively the top of the funnel and see where these leads came from in the first place. So for example, you might want to see how many leads that meet your ideal customer profile that we created before are coming from a particular source that you have used. Maybe that's Google Organic or LinkedIn Social, for example. If you click the button, scroll through the list or type in whichever source and medium you're looking for, you will find that here and you'll be able to immediately see how much of that traffic comes from that particular source. The reason why you would do that is once you have started to see what's coming in from that particular source in the context of specific organizations that you've attracted, that can start you along the process of verifying and improving the campaigns and the work on generating traffic from different sources based upon the quality of organizations you're generating from that activity. So for example, you may wish to start with the idea of seeing all of the traffic that comes from Google CPC. That will then give you a list of organizations that we have identified, and you can start to make an assessment by saying, are these the types of organizations that we want to generate when we spend money on this type of campaign? If the answer is yes, you would logically move to the next stage and see, once you've made that determination, are you then seeing from these organizations when they hit your site the right type of browsing behavior that would be indicative of a well-informed prospect who is browsing your site and likely to move through your sales process? Are you seeing them hitting the pages you would expect? Are they ending up where you would have liked to have driven them in the first place based upon the campaign? Again, that'll be a yes or no step for you in your process. If they're not, you may well wish to make a change, simplify the journey that they take, and rerun the same experiment to see if you drive more leads into the right part of your site to ultimately enable you to close them as real opportunities subsequently. If they do go to the right parts of your site and yet they still don't end up in the bucket that you would like them to be, so they don't end up as warm leads that have contacted you by email, by phone, or whatever the next step might be, you then might want to ask yourself, where did those journeys end? Why didn't they make it to a contact us page, for example? And again, that will be a stage in your process where you can potentially modify your process on the basis of what you find. As a final step, if those leads are then being sent across to the sales team, how effective are the sales team in terms of following up those leads that have been generated from the site? You'll be able to see that very simply in the way that we did by browsing the leads in the accounts, the ones that are connected to your CRM in this instance, and seeing if there are activities set up and opportunities set up for these people to actually effectively harvest the interest that you have created on the marketing side of the business. By following that process, you're likely to start spotting patterns in behavior from organizations that are visiting your site, gaps where they're not hitting pages that would probably answer questions that would enable them to become real opportunities for you, and then correct them and run your process again. Hopefully, each time you iterate upon campaigns, upon particular sources of traffic, or whatever it might be that you're working on the marketing side, you'll be able to see the results of that very quickly within Leadfeeder in terms of different journeys being taken, more leads being generated, or more sales activity being generated based on that activity as well. As a final point for today's demo, I'd like to point out one of the more hidden but highly valuable features within Leadfeeder, which is the ability to import lists. Within the filters section, you can search for imported company list. If you haven't yet uploaded one, you'll be given a prompt to upload a list. That will take you up into your settings, which we'll go to now, just so again, you know where to find all of the settings as well. If you jump across to account, you'll see imported lists, and you'll see the ability to import a CSV file. This is a simple 2-column file that will be both the names of the organizations and their web addresses. Once you've imported it, back in the filter that we just looked at, you can reference that uploaded list, imported list, in a feed. Why would you do this? So there are lots of different options to consider here. For example, if you have a list of competitors, you'd like to keep a track of what they do on your site. Maybe they're trying to benchmark themselves against you, for example. Import their list, create a competitors feed, and then periodically jump into the feed and see what journeys they're taking. Does it suggest to you anything that might be changing in the market or that you might need to react to based on their browsing activity? Another good example would be historic close lost opportunities. So where you thought that you would not be able to work with this organization in the future and it wouldn't happen. If you import the list of those leads, have a feed for closed lost opportunities, set the time frame to be recent, so maybe the last 4 weeks, for example. When you see leads appear in that feed, it may well suggest to you that those leads are not quite so lost after all, and they could yet still be very valid opportunities for you to work with in the future. You could then choose to send those leads back into your CRM, perhaps if you've deleted them, send them back into the CRM for a colleague of yours to work with after. Alternatively, if you're working with an account-based marketing approach where you already have defined a certain segment of the market that you'd like to work with, you could import those ABM lists in the same way, reference them in the same way, and when they start to appear on your site and take the journeys that you would hope they would take, again, that could be the prompts to send them into the CRM and to have them followed up by a member of your team if you would like to. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's demo recording. Within our academy on the Leadfeeder website, you will see lots of short form videos running through some of the features that we talked about today in more depth, as well as various different strategies for making use of the data as you get more and more experience with using the system. As always, if you have any questions for the Leadfeeder team based on what you've seen today and how to implement it, feel free to get in touch with our support team, which you'll see within the application lurking behind this orange bubble here. If you click this button, you can click here to send a message to the team. The average response time is less than 2 minutes during the day in both European and US time zones. And from there, you should be able to gain the support you need. Alternative sources of help and information if you'd like. If you click up here, you'll see that you have access to both the Leadfeeder Academy that you may well be watching this video from, the Help Center, which is a set of guides based on almost every feature within the application and all of the integrations that we have. And also from our site, our website, you can access our blog as well, where you'll find lots of case studies and examples of other clients making use of the data, as well as, for example, template emails for when you're doing your cold outreach work. Between all of those sources of information, we hope that you have gained what you need in order to be successful with Leadfeeder. And if you have, feel free to let us know what you felt of about the content, both within the Academy, within our blog, and we hope to speak to you soon. Thanks a lot.